The Wisp, Chapter 29. Despite the heavy feeling in her gut, Bara was relieved when they finally pulled up in front of the Lavender house. The goons exited the SUV in unison and held open the car doors. The driver opened the front passenger side for Courtney. Bara stepped out onto the gravel. There were the marble cherubs and Greek gods, no help as usual. Bara was on the far side and had to come around the car, and her arm in the grasp of a goon. She joined Colin and the other monstrosity of a man. The driver returned to the car and drove away. Bara and Colin were led, that is to say, dragged, into the house. Courtney followed. Gloria didn't come to the door. No maid, no witness. Courtney took off her coat and hung it on the antique rack. Her arms were heavily bandaged. Bara winced. The trip through the window had not left Courtney unscathed. But Bara quickly forgot her stepmother's pain. The locket lay on Courtney's chest, glittering on a dusty rose sweater set. "Take him up to the room I showed you," she told the muscle, "and lock the door. My stepdaughter and I will talk in the study." That wasn't a plan. Colin had the dagger. "You can't separate us," Bara said. The goons hesitated, but Courtney waved them off. "Lock the boy in, and then you are free." One of the men grabbed Colin, a little too roughly. He resisted, but with no success. Bara watched Colin and the hidden dagger disappear up the stairs. The look he threw over his bony shoulder told Bara he shared her distress. "Shall we?" Courtney didn't wait for a response, but went into the study. As long as Colin was locked up, she knew Bara wouldn't run. The study was neat and orderly. Antique books lined the walls, and their embossing glinted in the dim light. Heavy drapes were partly drawn, allowing yellow shears to let in a muted glow. A fire blazed in the fireplace. The study was comfortable and warm. Bara felt neither. There was the large chaise she'd taken cover behind earlier. Courtney had already settled in a matching wing chair. "Close the door and sit down." Bara did as she was told. She sat on the chaise, choosing the side farthest away from her stepmother and closest to the door. Anxiously, she waited for what was to come. Courtney drummed her fingernails in her lap. "What are we to do now?" she finally asked. Bara didn't have an answer. "Where's my father?" she countered. "Out looking for you, my dear. Needless to say, he's quite worried." "Then call him and let him know I'm home." Courtney actually chuckled, like Bara had told a joke. "In good time. First we need to get a few things straight." "Are you going to kill me?" "Kill you?" Courtney echoed. "I know your secret." "I think there's still much you do not know." Bara was finding it hard to think. Her focus was split. How could she get Colin downstairs? "Like what? I know plenty already." Courtney lifted a single, immaculately plucked eyebrow. "Tell me just how much you do know, and then I'll fill in the blanks." "I know you're a witch. I know that you lived a very long time. You're immortal or something. And I know you're evil." Bara all but screamed the evil part. Courtney gave a long sigh. "You've said all this before." And then she asked what she really wanted to know. "Where's the diary?" The heart of the matter, Bara thought. She said with far more bravado than she felt, "You'll never find it. You can do whatever you like to me, but I'll never tell. Colin won't talk either. People will come looking. He has parents, too. You won't get away with it. People will eventually figure you out, you and your partner." "My partner?" "Martha, your fellow witch. Where's she now?" Bara suddenly remembered the woman at the door the day before. The other witch. The dark hair, the familiar voice, the interest she'd taken in the diary. Oh my God, Amy. The other witch was Miss Corey. She had to be. Bara's defiance dissolved in a rush of fear. "Please don't hurt Amy. Call Miss Corey. Tell her not to hurt her. I'll tell you anything you want to know." "Bara, I won't." Smash. Something very solid hurtled through the bay window, landing with a decided thump on the Persian rug. Someone had thrown one of the smaller lawn statues through the glass. It was a cherub, now with a broken wing. Both Bara and Courtney sprang. Courtney was faster. She was at the window first. She was knocked off her feet as something long and thin flew through the broken glass and tackled her to the ground. Colin had escaped. Of course he escaped. Courtney had locked him in the upstairs room and let the goons go. She'd made a foolish mistake. Colin would have simply climbed down, scaling the side of the mansion as easily as he did the dorm buildings. Catch! The dagger came hurtling across the room, fortunately hilt first. Bara caught it, but it flipped in her grip. The blade just grazed her arm, cutting a thin line of red. She winced and studied the wound. It wasn't deep. Dismissing the pain, she returned her attention to the struggle going on between Colin and Courtney. Colin, despite his lean build, was strong. Not as strong as the goons, but certainly stronger than Courtney. but it appeared Courtney would make short work of him. She was on top, and he was fighting with all he had. His hands were around her throat, but this seemed not to affect her. Alarmingly, there was a pool of blood forming. Colin had been cut from his trip through the broken window and was bleeding pretty badly. Dagger in hand, Bara approached the wriggling mass of arms and legs. She stopped. There was a snapping sound. She realized now why Colin had had his hands around Courtney's neck. He'd been after the locket, which he now clutched in his hand. Courtney screamed and tried to retrieve it. Using his length to advantage, Colin held the chain out of her reach. "Bara!" Courtney watched wide-eyed as the locket slid across into Bara's waiting hands. "No," she shouted, "you don't know what you're doing!" Bara didn't hesitate. She opened the locket. There was the amber as she knew it would be. To keep it still, she gripped it between her knees and raised the dagger above her head. With full force, she brought the blade down. Like it was cutting through something much softer than petrified sap, metal pierced amber. Like flesh. As though it were as soft as skin, the blade plunged into the amber, disappearing somehow to its hilt. Tiny fault lines spread throughout the amber. There was a sound like the breaking of a nice sheet, and it shattered into countless pieces. The fracture gave off a blinding light, and a force pushed out. The air cracked with sound and strength. Thrown from the blast, Bara slid into the chaise. Colin and Courtney were flung to the opposite wall. Heavy furniture moved about on its own. Dislodged books threatened to brain the unsuspecting. Bara covered her head. Colin and Courtney, possibly unconscious, did not. Flashes of silver surged through the air. Bara lost sight of the other two. She lost sight of everything. She blinked, trying to clear her vision, but saw only light, no form. Then came the noise. The strength of it moved the floor beneath in waves. Different from the sound of the first explosion, it was a high-pitched, a squeak, no, a siren. It grew louder and higher, threatening to pierce eardrums. Bara put her hands to her head and tried to hang on.
The Wisp is published on Amazon.com. Also available on Amazon is Monsters, Real and Imagined, Tragic, Frightening, and Funny, All Too Brief, a collection of short stories and poetry. Strays, a collection of short stories and philosophical love poems, and Tattoo, Calling All Soldiers Home, a collection of poems in brevity.